my literary luminaries, and welcome back to another Top 5 Wednesday. Today's Top 5 Wednesday topic is your top 5 favorite underrated books. I'm a little questionable on what underrated actually means, so I picked 5 books that a lot of people don't necessarily know or talk about, or are books of an author I really enjoy that are less brought up than their others. I don't know. This is my opportunity to share books that I don't think you've read with you. So, without further ado, let's get started. Number 1. I don't know if I've talked much about number 1 on here, but the book is Male of the Species by Alex Mint. And a lot of people that have spoken to me in person when they start talking to me, especially about my time in grad school, this book comes up all the time because I don't ever stop talking about Alex Mint. He's a phenomenal speaker, a really excellent person. I genuinely enjoyed both times I got a chance to hear him speak. And he has a book of short stories. As far as I can tell, it's the only book he has out at the moment. But they all sort of deal with masculinity and how different people in different cultures sort of deal with it, and their acceptance or not thereof. And he does a really, really nice job with dealing with all of this. I genuinely enjoyed it. It's not a very long book. I mean, I think it's only about that thick. It's on my bookshelf. If I wasn't so lazy, I'd get up and get it. But it's a fantastic book. I love Alex Mint, and it's one of those, I don't know how well known he or his book are. And so if I can get more word out on the awesomeness of Alex Mint, I am 100% willing to do such. Number 2 is interesting because it reminds me a great deal of a book that does get talked about a lot, but I don't hear this one talked about nearly as much. That's Neal Stephenson's Snow Crash. Snow Crash has always kind of reminded me a little bit of Ready Player One. It's not quite the same thing, but there's some similar aspects to it. I know that there's a tabletop gaming system like Dungeons & Dragons style that is inspired by, if not based on, Snow Crash. I believe it's called Shadowrun. I probably got that wrong. But it's a fascinating story dealing with technology and virtual reality and, how something like a virus would affect stuff like that. And it's so difficult to describe, but I genuinely enjoyed it so much. And anyway, the sense of humor in it is great. The main character's name is Hiro Protagonist. I kid you not. Hiro. Hiro Protagonist. If that doesn't tell you what you need to know about the sense of humor of this book, I'm sorry. There's no better way for me to describe it to you. I picked it up on a whim because I had some friends that were playing the game. They're like, oh yeah, it's based on this. If it's interesting, you should read it. I picked it up at a friend's house and got sucked in and then promptly left the book there. And then I moved away. So I had to buy my own copy of the book, and such I did, and now it is wonderful and I've read it. But it's interesting because I don't hear it talked about all that much, and I'm not quite sure why that is, especially with, them making a movie of Ready Player One, the advent of Sword Art Online, the anime series that really reminds me of Ready Player One. I just, in this sort of era, I'm really surprised that more people haven't, put it further into the popular lexicon, I guess. Number 3. This is definitely one in that the author is well known, but this book isn't necessarily. I know that Diane Duane has done a whole bunch of books dealing with Star Trek, I believe. Yes, Star Trek, double checked. And also her Young Wizard series. But the series that I never hear spoken about, and the one that I particularly love the most, starts out with The Book of Night with Moon, which is attached, sort of, to her Young Wizard series, but is not directly related. Some of the characters, or at least some of the concepts I know overlap, but Book of Night with Moon is all cats. It's like cat wizards. And I've picked up so many little things about like cats and how I deal with them and the sort of the thought process of it all from these books. And it's so sad that I never hear anyone talking about them. It's such a good series. I mean, series. As far as I know, there's only 2 books. It's Book of Night with Moon and To Visit the Queen. To Visit the Queen? To Visit the Queen. But they're both fantastic books, and I love them. And if there's more, then I desperately need to get them. But it's that kind of thing. It's like, this author is very much talked about and she has all these awesome books, but what about these other wonderful ones? I guess that's basically what underrated means, right? I'm doing this right? I think I'm doing this right. Number 4. Number 4 is, it's not so much the concept is not underrated, but I think the book perhaps is. And that is Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Now, yes, Jekyll and Hyde is super popular, and it's in all sorts of popular culture, and it's iconic and huge. But the problem is, if you go and you look at a lot of like cultural representations of Jekyll and Hyde, they're not accurate. If you look at League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, for example, we have Jekyll, this relatively small and meek scientist, and that's fine, he does all these things. And then he turns into Hyde, who is actually the Hulk's cousin. This frustrates me, because if you read the book, Hyde is actually smaller than Jekyll. He's a bit shorter, and there's not a lot of distinct characteristics other than he gives off a definite vibe of evil. Like, this is not someone you want to be around, and you can't quite place your finger on why. And like, that's really the frightening thing about Hyde to me, is that in general, he just looks like everyone else, but there's something wrong with him, and you can't put your finger on it. And that's the scary part. But we don't see that. One, because it's a lot harder to portray, I guess, in popular culture, like in movies. It's harder to show that dichotomy. And so we make Hyde this big monster, chasing down the streets of London or what have you. And Jekyll, this very quiet and meek and self-contained kind of character. And so we get the concept, but we don't really get the truth of it. And that's why I say that the book, specifically only the book, is a little underrated, because a lot of people don't seem to know that portion of it, because they've only seen Van Helsing and League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. And don't get me wrong, I love these movies, but... And finally, number 5. Of course, I had to put M.C.A. Hogarth on the list, but this is another one that, again, the series of hers that get the most attention are, the Peltied universe, and, her space opera stuff, and the, with the Ainadari, and the people of Karishtar, and, all that stuff. But what gets sort of lost in the middle is a little book called A Rosary of Stones and Thorns, and it's on the bookshelf. You can't see it all that well. But Rosary of Stones and Thorns is, I think, the first book of M.C.A. Hogarth's I actually read. I'm not sure if it's the first one I got. Or actually, I think it's the first one I got, but it's not the first bit I read. Because I'm fairly certain I read the first chapter or so of Earthrise before I got Rosary. Or at least before I read Rosary, I'm not sure. But I know I read Rosary actually right around this time of year at my first residency, because I brought it with me on my Nook so that I could have something to read when I was in my apartment by myself. And absolutely fell in love. And so that's when all of this M.C.A. Hogarth obsession started. So you can blame that book if you really like. But it's a really interesting book. It deals with, God and angels and redemption and all that sort of stuff. And knowing the author's connection back to Catholicism and Christianity and all of that, I know that she knows what she's talking about. And she has a deep investment in it. And that shows in the writing. It makes it that much more rich. And, no, I don't think you need to be religious to enjoy the book. You can enjoy angels without any of that. I think it helps, but that's just me. But it's a really, really nice book. I don't think it gets the recognition it deserves in, the myriad of books that she has. But so whenever I can, I like trying to point out that one specifically, because it is, at least at the moment, a standalone. I think I've heard her mention something about a sequel, which would be super cool. But it's definitely one that I recommend people check out if they're, open to the topic of the story. Those are my top 5 underrated books. let me know what are yours. Let me know in the comments down below or on Twitter at KRyanFrey. As always, I love to hear from y'all. If you liked the video, be sure to give it a thumbs up. It is very much appreciated and very much helps. And hey, if you're new to the channel and you like what you see, why not subscribe? YouTube will very kindly notify you anytime that I post a new video, which should be every Tuesday and Thursday. But until next time, I shall bid you all adieu, and I will see you all on Tuesday for the last Tuesday Talks of the week, of the month. Bye! Oh, what does that even mean? I totally thought that was a different book for a minute. Number 4. Star Trek, I believe. I don't know if that's right. I should really find out if that's right before I continue on. Last one of the week. I'm smart. I have fancy pieces of paper that say I'm smart. Damn fine education.